So in August 2006, Elon Musk wrote a blog post that completely changed the trajectory of Tesla. And within that blog post, the last 5 lines contained Tesla's entire strategy for market domination. Here's how it went. Build a sports car. Use that money to build an affordable car. Use that money to build an even more affordable car. Also provide zero-emission electric power generation options. And then number 5, don't tell anyone. So that was it, 5 lines. And to give you a little bit of an update, last week, Tesla was worth $1.5 trillion. And that is trillion with a T. And it was 5 fucking lines that got them there. Now, I'm willing to bet that right now, you probably got, 17 tabs open in your browser or something like that. 3 different projects that you're kind of half working on. A to-do list that honestly looks like a receipt at this point. And you get into the end of every single week asking yourself the same goddamn question. What actually got done? Where did all of my time go? Because no doubt you were busy, right? Of course you were. You were flat out all week. But if someone asked you to actually point out what it is that you would achieve this week, you would probably struggle to answer. And if that sounds like a familiar reality for you, I want to explain why that's likely happening. Because it's not what you think it is. So let me start off by telling you what nobody tells you about ADHD type brains and focus. The problem isn't that you can't focus, because you and I both know that you can hyperfocus better than the majority of people when you're dialed into something that actually captures your interest. The real problem is that you're trying to focus on too many things at once, and your brain is wired in a way that makes this pattern almost inevitable. So I want to walk you through why smart people with ADHD type brains are actually more vulnerable to this than anybody else. So I call this the additive trap. And it works like this. You learn something new and your brain lights up. You get that dopamine hit fresh into those veins. So what do you instinctively do? You add it to your business. Let's say a new marketing strategy pops up onto your feed. You add it in. You listen to a podcast and you get another great idea for a new offer. You add it in. A partnership opportunity lands in your inbox, so you add it in. And over time, what happens is you end up with this massive pile of initiatives and projects and strategies that you are trying to run simultaneously. And then you're sat there wondering why you feel completely overwhelmed and scattered all the time. Well, here's the bit that most of your business gurus and coaches won't tell you, because they don't understand how your brain actually works. You are a novelty-seeking dopamine machine. And if it makes you feel any better, so am I. And it's not a character flaw that we need to beat ourselves up about. It's not a discipline issue that can be fixed with cold baths. It is just how both you and I are wired. The hunter brain, which is what I call this neurotype, it doesn't sit still. It's constantly scanning for new opportunities. New prey, as an example, if you want to think about it from that evolutionary perspective that I often do. It's scanning the environment, looking for the next thing. Now, from an evolutionary standpoint, this was absolutely brilliant. This is what allowed us to find greener pastures, to be curious about lots of different things and to try them all out, whether that be environments or foods. And all of that essentially led to evolution. We found different food sources, different areas to live, and different ways to ultimately survive. This is that creative, curious, innovative part of us. And it's that curiosity and novelty seeking that kept us alive and helped us to adapt over time. But from a modern business point of view, this constant novelty chasing creates what most people nowadays call shiny object syndrome, which means that we constantly get distracted by other things and then add more to our plate. So that's brilliant when you're generating ideas, when you're spotting opportunities that most people miss, when you're connecting dots that no one else can see. But it can also become catastrophic when you're trying to execute on those same ideas. And let me be clear, I've done this plenty of times myself, by the way. Over the past 10 years that I've been in business, I have usually had multiple different projects in businesses running on the side. And then I've had lots of different offers within each of those businesses. And it's basically felt like I've been running tons of micro businesses at the same time. Every single one demanding my attention and each one needing a tremendous amount of my energy. And at that point in time, I couldn't understand why I felt so exhausted all the time when I was supposed to be what people would call successful on paper. But the truth is, I was internally drowning. Now, I want to tell you about Ryan, because Ryan's story is going to illustrate exactly what I'm talking about here. So for context, Ryan runs a high-performance coaching business for golfers. He is highly qualified and very passionate about what he does. Exactly the kind of person who should be making really good money doing something that he loves. But when we first started working together, he said something to me that I hear all of the bloody time. He said something along the lines of, "Jack, I'm busy all week, but I genuinely cannot point at what is getting done." And what was happening with Ryan is he was trying lots of different things that scattered his attention. He was creating lots of different types of content across multiple platforms: TikTok, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, the works. And he was creating lots of different bespoke solutions for each one of his clients. Every client got a custom swing plan. Every client ultimately got a different approach. Now, he rationalized this because he wanted to serve them better, which sounds pretty noble, right? Now, although that sounds cute in principle, the reality is that it was killing him. He felt exhausted every day, like he was constantly swimming against the tide, exerting so much energy, but not really going anywhere. And that was the bit that was frustrating him the most. He'd put in all of this work, all of this energy, and at the end of the week, he'd look back and think, where did it get me? And that's probably the most demoralizing thing, because there's only so long that you can do that without thinking, well, what's the point in all of this? Because you're putting in loads of inputs, but you're not getting the outputs back as a result. So after understanding all of this, I introduced him to the straight line business principle. Now, this is the principle that myself and my clients who all have this brain type build from. And right there on the spot, something clicked for him. Like, you could literally see it happen real time on the call. Instantly, he could see where all of his energy was being diluted. He could see that it was dispersing among multiple different things. And that is ultimately why he felt so exhausted all of the time. Because he was putting in so many inputs, but not getting any of the rewards from each of those inputs. And that was because of the principle of dilution. And it was in that moment that he finally understood that it wasn't a him problem. It wasn't that he lacked work ethic by any stretch of the imagination. The man was putting in 60 to 70-hour working weeks. And it definitely wasn't that he lacked knowledge. He knew his stuff inside out, probably better than most people in this field. The problem was his business had no straight line. There was no clear path from A to B. Everything was branching off in different directions, and he was trying to run down all of those paths simultaneously, giving them all the same amount of attention, which, if you visualize that, isn't possible. So we did the opposite to what most people do when they feel overwhelmed. Most people in that situation, they start looking for more. They start looking for different strategies, different ways of operating, and as a result, they add more into the mix, because they think that new thing they've just found and therefore added is going to be the answer to their problems. More systems, more tools, more strategies to manage all of that complexity that they find themselves in. Whereas we did the opposite. We simplified and we subtracted. And as a result, we straightened that line. In short, we essentially focused on one hero client that he wanted to work with, one clear transformation that he provided for them and only them. And we created one signature system that he takes them through every single time. And this resulted in everything in his business now having a clear through line. There were no branches constantly coming off. And this meant that instead of being like a shotgun that sprays everywhere with his attention, he was like a sniper with this incredible amount of precision. He got rid of the bespoke offers that he was giving to all of his clients as they came through, and we aggressively subtracted until all that was left was what was needed to be on that straight line. Now, truthfully, he was pretty nervous to begin with, because he thought that this was going to have this detrimental effect on his business, which is potentially what you're thinking right now. Like, if I'm not offering all of these different things, won't I lose clients? Won't I be giving less of a service? But it actually had the opposite effect, because instead of diluting all of his attention everywhere and ultimately, if we call a spade, half-arsing everything, he was able to collect all of his attention and energy and put it into one thing. And if anybody does that, the chances of that one thing being world-class is pretty inevitable. So let's fast forward to now. He feels positive and energized because he can finally see that he's getting outcomes as a result of his inputs. And I personally think that that was the thing that was missing before. Because when you're not achieving that, when you're not seeing the fruits of your labor, that's probably the most demoralizing thing that you can experience as an entrepreneur. And I say that from firsthand experience because I spent probably 2.5 years in that place where I was putting in the work, I was grinding, but I wasn't actually getting into this state of momentum. I wasn't able to see the fruits of my labor, and it drove me fucking insane. Now both me and Ryan are in a place where we feel energized and lit up by business again. And that's because we are both able to tangibly see the results of what we have put in. So let me break down very quickly why this matters specifically for your ADHD type brain, because I want you to really understand the mechanism that's happening right here. The consequence of not having a straight line focus is that you disperse all of your energy into multiple directions at once. And as I'm sure you can imagine, that weakens everything. Every single thing you touch gets a fraction of your energy instead of the full force of it. And I want you to picture this like a shotgun versus a sniper rifle that I referenced earlier, because this metaphor really helped me to understand what was happening inside of my own business. Now picture a sawn-off shotgun, right? It spreads the impact across a wide area. It looks impressive, makes a lot of noise, and you feel like you're actually doing something. You're creating a lot of damage. But if we were to actually look at the force of any single point where those pellets land, it's pretty minimal. It doesn't make a great deal of impact. It splashes open the flesh, but it doesn't go all the way through. Whereas a sniper, on the other hand, that concentrates all of that force onto a single point. One target, one shot, with the aim of maximum impact. All of that energy goes into that one thing, and that's what creates the breakthrough. That's why the bullet comes out the other side. Now, your ADHD type brain is naturally like a shotgun. That's just how it operates. It wants to fire in every direction simultaneously, because that's the novelty-seeking behavior at work. A new idea over there catches your attention. An interesting opportunity over there pulls your focus away from the thing that's important that you should be doing right now. There's a shiny object at 3 o'clock that suddenly looks like the best thing that you've ever seen since sliced bread, and your brain wants to chase all of them at once. But the marketplace doesn't reward shotgun energy. It rewards sniper precision. It rewards the person who can stay focused on the one thing long enough to actually become known for it, to build real expertise in it, to create momentum that compounds over time. Now, remember those 5 lines from Elon that I mentioned at the start? That's sniper thinking. And it's not because Elon lacks ideas. We know that's not true. The man's brain probably generates more ideas before breakfast than most people have in a quarter. But he understood something critical about focus and execution. He knew that spreading across multiple directions would dilute everything. So he picked the straightest possible line and he just executed aggressively on that. So why do we keep adding things instead of subtracting them? And why is it so hard for us to just pick one thing and stick with it? Well, it comes back to the dopamine. Your brain gets a hit every time you learn something new. Every time you have a new idea, every time you spot a new opportunity. And this is where ADHD type entrepreneurs get absolutely screwed, because you're probably smarter than the average person. And I'm sure you've been told that for the majority of your life, which means that you likely learn faster than the average person, which also means that you get more of these dopamine hits than the average person. And finally, it also means that you end up adding more shit to your business than the average person does. And I see this all the time with the entrepreneurs that I work with. It's never that they lack ideas. It's often that they have too many. And they have too many without a filter to decide which ones actually matter and which ones are just noise. Think about the difference here. The average business owner, they learn one new strategy and they go, that's interesting. Maybe I'll try that next quarter. They'll sit on it. They'll think about it. They'll plan it out. But you learn one new strategy and you're implementing it by Tuesday morning, except you're also still implementing the strategy that you learned last week, and the one from the podcast that you listened to yesterday, and the framework that you saw someone post on Twitter this morning. And all of those things are happening simultaneously, and you're wondering why you feel like you're drowning. And what is it that breaks first when we find ourselves in this place? Usually, it's you. Your mental health starts to crack. You start questioning whether you're cut out for this, whether you're capable, whether you've got what it takes. And the irony is, you probably have more capability than most people in your field, but you're dispersing it so widely that none of it makes a dent. So what you actually need is a narrow field of view. So narrow that it physically blocks everything else out. Not because the other stuff isn't good. I bet some of the ideas you're having are great, but your brain genuinely can't handle the cognitive load of multiple focuses at once. It just isn't built for that, and neither is mine. The hunter brain is built to lock onto one target and pursue it with everything that it's got. And that's when you enter a state of hyperfocus. That is when you become unstoppable. So if you're sitting there right now feeling busy but directionless, if you're working your ass off every single week but you can't point at any real progress, this is probably why. You're running the shotgun pattern. You're firing in every direction. You're exhausting yourself. And you're wondering why nothing's actually landing with any real force. The answer isn't to try harder. That's not what's going to fix this. The answer is to try narrower. You need one straight line focus, one thing that you're going to become known for, one thing that you could put all of your energy and your attention into. And everything else that isn't that can go into the parking lot for another day. I'm not saying that you never come back to it, but it's not a now thing. But until you've created enough momentum with this one thing, you cannot afford to add complexity back into the mix without it derailing everything. So start by asking yourself this question. If I could be known for one thing in the marketplace, what would it be? What's the one transformation that I can create better than anyone else? If I had to focus on just one thing that would grow my business in the next quarter, what would it be? Get clear on that. Write it down, and then subtract everything else until all that's left is what needs to be on your straight line focus and business. And here's what happens when you finally do this. When you finally give yourself permission to focus on just one thing, your brain gets to do what it does best, which is hyperfocus. And hyperfocus for an ADHD type brain is genuinely a superpower when you let it be. When you're locked onto something that matters, something that captures your interest, you can outwork, outthink, and out-execute pretty much everyone. You just need to point it at the right target. All that scattered shotgun energy that was going everywhere, it concentrates into a singular laser beam because you're not fighting your wiring anymore. You're actually working with it for the first time. You're using your natural ability to slip into a state of hyperfocus. But this time you're pointing it at something that actually matters instead of letting it bounce around between 17 different things. And trust me, when you do this, the results come in thick and fast. Like Ryan, who went from exhausted and directionless to energized and getting consistent calls booked into his calendar. Or like me, going from running multiple businesses with multiple micro businesses with tons of offers, feeling like I was constantly drowning, to running a straight line business that actually gives me the freedom that I wanted and started this for in the first place. The pattern is the same across the board. I've seen it enough times now. So look, Tesla's worth 1.4 trillion because Elon had the discipline to write 5 lines and then actually just stick to them. Ryan's getting calls in his calendar and growing his business because he finally stopped trying to be everything to everyone and just focused on one thing. He focused on one thing. He built one straight line business. We need to simplify and subtract and find the straight line. This isn't about limiting your potential. That's not what I'm asking you to do here. This is about unlocking it. Your brain is capable of extraordinary things when it is pointed in one direction. Think of Thomas Edison with the light bulb. He focused all of his attention on the straight line of doing and creating the light bulb. And 1,000 attempts later, he got it done. That is what happens when you have a straight line focus. Pick one target and give your brain permission to ignore everything else for now. And watch what happens when all of that scattered energy finally has somewhere to go. When it can actually concentrate and build momentum in one direction. Because if it's good enough for Elon, it's good enough for you and me.